All right, let's jump right in. Today we're going deep on confined space safety. We've got a really cool video with tons of examples, and I think it's going to be a really informative deep dive.
Yeah, it's a topic that a lot of people might think they understand, but there are so many little details that can really make a difference between, staying safe and potentially having a really bad day.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Like when you think of confined spaces, you probably picture like, I don't know, tanks or maybe those big silos you see at industrial sites.
Yeah, or pipelines, those underground tunnels.
Right. But I was surprised to learn that,
Yeah.
even something as simple as an equipment housing could be a confined space.
Oh, absolutely. It's not always about how small the space is. It's more about things like limited access and potential hazards, and whether or not it's designed for people to be in there all the time.
So basically, if you're going into a space that's not meant for you to hang out in all day, and there's a chance of something going wrong, you need to be thinking about confined space safety, whether you're prepping for a job interview or you're starting a new job or even just for your own knowledge. This deep dive is for you.
That's right. We're going to cover all the essentials, so listen up.
Okay, so let's start with something that might seem basic, but is absolutely crucial. Work permits and certifications.
Those pieces of paper, they can be your best friend. Think of it like this. A work permit is like your VIP pass to get into a confined space. It tells you what you're supposed to be doing, points out the potential dangers, and lays out all the safety rules you need to follow.
But it's not just one kind of permit, right?
Yeah.
Our research showed that.
Right.
Companies in different parts of the world might have totally different systems.
Yeah, you got it. For instance, you mentioned a company in Abu Dhabi. They might rely more on certifications, while a company in India could use a more detailed permit system.
Exactly. So it's super important to know what the rules are. Wherever you're working, you can't just assume anything when it comes to safety.
Absolutely not. It's always better to ask too many questions than not enough.
Now let's talk about something that really dives into the details.
Yeah.
The Job Safety Analysis, or JSA.
Oh, yeah, the JSA. This is where things get interesting.
It's more than just a checklist, right? Like a whole plan for how to do the job safely, step by step.
It's like a detective's case file. You're looking at every little thing that could go wrong and figuring out how to prevent it.
You're not just reacting to problems, you're thinking ahead and trying to avoid them altogether.
Exactly, and that's the key.
But paperwork alone can't keep you safe.
Right.
You need to actually put those precautions into action.
Absolutely. That's where things like isolation and gas testing come in.
Okay, so isolation, we're talking about making sure the space is totally disconnected from any power sources, right?
You got it. Anything that could pose a risk, electricity, pressurized systems, you name it. You need to make sure it's all shut off and locked out before you even think about going in.
It's like flipping the off switch on any hidden dangers.
That's a great way to put it. And to make sure everything's really off, you need to have those isolation certificates. And something called a PNID.
A PNID, what's that?
It stands for Piping and Instrumentation Diagram. Basically, it's a blueprint that shows you how all the systems are connected. It helps you double check that everything is truly isolated.
So no room for assumptions there.
Nope, not when it comes to safety.
Okay, now gas testing, I've got to be honest, I thought it was just like waving a meter around and checking if the air was okay.
Well, there's definitely more to it than that.
You're looking for all sorts of things, right? Not just oxygen levels.
That's right. You're checking for flammable gases, toxic gases, anything that could create a hazardous atmosphere.
And that's where the competent person comes in. Someone who knows how to do all those tests properly.
Exactly. And one detail that really stood out to me from the video, they talked about the importance of having a dedicated attendant during gas testing.
Oh yeah, like someone who's watching the whole operation and making sure everything's safe.
They keep track of who goes in and out, they monitor the conditions, and if anything goes wrong, they're the ones who call for help.
It's like having an extra set of eyes on the situation.
Yeah.
Just in case.
It's a crucial safety net, for sure.
And speaking of safety nets, that brings us to another vital part of confined space safety. The rescue plan. It's something you hope you'll never need, but you absolutely have to have it in place.
Think of it as your escape route, planned out in advance so you know exactly what to do if something goes wrong.
It includes things like emergency contact information.
Right.
And specific procedures for different scenarios.
Absolutely. You need to be prepared for anything.
And the plan has to be in place before anyone even sets foot in the confined space, not something you figure out after the fact.
You got it. It's all about being proactive, not reactive.
Okay, so we've covered permits, JSAs, isolation, gas testing, and rescue plans. That's a pretty solid foundation for confined space safety, right?
It is, but it's just the beginning. The reality is that safety goes beyond paperwork and procedures. It's about personal responsibility, vigilance, and a constant awareness of the potential risks. And that's something we'll delve into even further in the next part of our deep dive.
All right, welcome back to our deep dive on confined space safety. We really dug into the fundamentals last time. Permits, JSAs, isolation, gas testing. We covered it all.
We did. We laid a good foundation. But now it's time to get a little more practical.
Exactly. Let's talk about what you actually need when you're inside a confined space. And I'm talking about gearing up, literally, with the right personal protective equipment, or PPE.
Yeah, PPE is crucial. It's your first line of defense against all those potential hazards.
I like to think of it as a suit of armor, protecting you from head to toe.
I like that analogy. It's very fitting. And just like a suit of armor, your PPE needs to be tailored to the specific threats you might face.
All right, you wouldn't wear a chainmail shirt to a gunfight, so you gotta make sure your PPE is up to the task in a confined space.
Exactly. You need the right protection for the right job.
So let's break it down, starting with respirators. We know those are essential if there's a risk of bad air.
Absolutely, but it's not as simple as just grabbing any old mask.
Right, you need to know what kind of hazards you're dealing with, and make sure you have a respirator that can handle them.
If you're dealing with toxic gases, for example, you need a respirator with the right cartridges to filter them out. A dust mask won't do anything in that situation.
And what about eye and face protection? That video we watched showed some pretty scary eye injuries.
Yeah, those were some tough scenes.
Yeah.
Definitely highlighted the importance of protecting your eyes.
Even something as simple as grinding or welding can send debris flying in a confined space.
And in a tight space, it's even harder to dodge those projectiles.
So safety glasses are a must. Or maybe even a full face shield if you're doing something really risky.
It's better to be safe than sorry, especially when it comes to your vision.
Absolutely. And let's not forget about head protection. I mean, you're working in a confined space, you're probably bumping into things.
Yeah, there are often low ceilings, pipes, all sorts of obstacles to watch out for.
You could easily bump your head if you're not careful.
A helmet is essential. It's like a bodyguard for your brain.
Right. Even a small bump can lead to a concussion. And the last thing you want is to be disoriented in an already dangerous environment.
Definitely not a good combination.
Okay, so we've talked about protecting ourselves. Now let's talk about protecting the environment inside the confined space. And I'm talking about ventilation, making sure there's enough fresh air and getting rid of any harmful gases.
Ventilation is often called the lungs of a confined space, and for good reason. It's all about keeping the air breathable and safe.
Just like our own lungs, right? We need fresh air to survive, and so does a confined space.
Exactly. Now, sometimes natural ventilation might be enough, like opening a hatch or a door.
But a lot of times you'll need some kind of mechanical ventilation, like fans or blowers to really circulate the air.
Yeah, especially if you're dealing with hazardous gases or fumes from the work you're doing. You need to make sure those gases are being actively removed from the space.
It's like creating a safe bubble of air inside the confined space.
That's a good way to think about it. And of course, you need to monitor that ventilation system regularly. Make sure it's working properly, just like you'd check your own breathing.
Right. You don't want to be stuck in there with a ventilation system that's on the fritz.
Definitely not. That could be a real problem.
All right. So we've got our PPE. We've got ventilation. What else do we need?
Communication. Being able to talk to each other is essential in a confined space.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You've got people inside, people outside. They need to be able to communicate clearly and quickly, especially if something goes wrong.
Exactly. It's like a lifeline connecting everyone involved.
So what kind of communication systems are we talking about? Walkie-talkies?
Yeah, two-way radios are common, but it really depends on the specific situation.
Sometimes you might need something more sophisticated, like a system that can filter out background noise.
Or a system that uses light signals if it's too dark or smoky to see hand signals.
It's all about adapting the technology to the environment and the task at hand.
But just having the technology isn't enough. You need a good communication plan, too.
Oh, that's interesting. So what does a communication plan look like?
It's not rocket science. It's just about being clear and organized. Who talks to whom? How often do you check in? What happens if the main system fails? All these things need to be spelled out in advance.
So everyone's on the same page and there's no confusion, especially in an emergency.
Exactly. You don't want to be figuring things out on the fly when every second counts.
All right, so we've got PPE, ventilation, communication. That's a lot to keep track of.
It is, but there are a couple more things we need to talk about. Things that might seem small, but can make a big difference in safety.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What are we missing?
Signage and housekeeping. These might not be as exciting as respirators or rescue plans, but they're just as important in the grand scheme of things.
So signage, that's like warning signs and stuff, right? Reminding people of the hazards.
Exactly. It's like having a safety briefing posted right at the entrance, reminding everyone of the rules and the risks involved.
In good housekeeping, well, that's just common sense, isn't it? Keep things clean and organized.
It is common sense, but you'd be surprised how often it gets overlooked, especially when people are rushing to get the job done.
Right. It's easy to let things slide when you're focused on other stuff.
But in a confined space, clutter can be really dangerous.
Oh, I see what you mean. Like tripping over tools or hoses, that could easily lead to an accident.
Exactly. A well-organized work area is a safe work area.
So good housekeeping isn't just about being tidy. It's about preventing accidents.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. PPE, ventilation, communication, signage, housekeeping. It's clear that confined space safety is about way more than just knowing the rules.
Absolutely. It's about understanding how those rules apply in the real world. And it's about paying attention to all the little details that can make a difference.
And most importantly, it's about the people who are actually doing the work.
Exactly, because even with all the best equipment and procedures in the world, human error is still a factor. And that's something we'll explore in depth in the final part of our deep dive.
All right, welcome back for the final part of our confined space safety deep dive. We've talked about permits, JSAs, PPE, all that good stuff.
We've really covered a lot of ground, but today we're going to focus on something that's often overlooked.
Oh, okay, I'm all ears.
The human element. Because at the end of the day, safety isn't just about procedures and equipment, it's about people.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, people make mistakes, right?
Of course, we're all human, but in a confined space, even a small mistake can have huge consequences.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like you're in a tight space, maybe visibility is limited, you get tired, you're rushing, and suddenly you're taking shortcuts.
Exactly. And those shortcuts can put you and your team at risk.
So how do we avoid those kinds of mistakes? How do we make sure everyone's thinking about safety?
It starts with building a strong safety culture.
Okay, but what does that actually mean? Like, what does a good safety culture look like?
It's about open communication, for one thing.
We talked about communication systems before, but this is different, right?
It's about encouraging people to speak up if they see something unsafe.
Even if it seems like a small thing.
Absolutely. Sometimes those small things can turn into big problems if they're ignored.
So it's about making sure people feel comfortable raising concerns without being afraid to get in trouble.
Exactly. And it's also about prioritizing safety over speed.
Oh, that's a tough one. Everyone's always under pressure to get things done quickly.
I know, but rushing can lead to mistakes. And in a confined space, mistakes can be deadly.
So it's about shifting that mindset from just getting the job done to getting it done safely.
Exactly. And that takes buy-in from everyone, from the workers to the supervisors.
Everyone needs to be on the same page, working together to stay safe.
Absolutely. And part of that is looking out for each other.
Like reminding each other about the rules and speaking up if you see someone taking a risk.
Exactly. It's about shared responsibility because we all want to go home safe at the end of the day.
Okay, I like that. Shared responsibility, looking out for each other. What else can we do to improve safety?
Well, one thing that's really helpful is learning from past incidents.
You mean like studying accidents that have already happened?
Exactly. By analyzing those accidents, we can figure out what went wrong and hopefully prevent similar accidents from happening again.
It's like that saying, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it.
Exactly. And that learning process shouldn't be limited to just one company or one team.
You mean we should be sharing information about safety across the whole industry?
Absolutely. The more we share, the more we learn, the safer everyone becomes.
Okay, that makes sense. So to wrap things up, what are the key takeaways from our deep dive?
Well, first, remember that safety is everyone's responsibility.
From the workers to the supervisors, everyone has a role to play.
Second, never stop learning. The field of confined space safety is always evolving. So stay informed, seek out training, and keep up with the latest best practices.
And finally, remember that even the smallest details can make a difference. So pay attention, be vigilant, and always put safety first.
Well said. Now, as you go about your day, take a look around. How many confined spaces do you see? And how many hidden dangers might be lurking in those spaces?
We hope this deep dive has given you the knowledge and the tools to stay safe in any confined space. Thanks for joining us, and remember, safety first.